let's start right off with Marty. What the fuck is going on with Marty Jannetty? Is this a Billy Jack Haynes incident? Has he lost his faculties? Is something wrong? Or was this late at night and he had been watching a movie that he appropriated some of the plot for his own story? What happened here?
I don't have any firm answers on this in terms of his faculties. I mean, there have been stories about Marty Jannetty for years. I think it's either him and the Iron Sheik that have the record for the amount of times being fired by WWE.
Well, but now, in all honesty, a couple of those I don't think were deserved for Marty. They brought him back. At one time, they made him one of the new Rockers. Remember that? With poor old Al Snow, who had been doomed from the start when they made him Avatar and he became Leif Cassidy. That one, but I've worked with Marty. Marty worked for me, went on the Super Bowl of wrestling in Smoky Mountain, which is where he ran into Shawn Michaels again. And that's why they hired him back. Shawn, I think, said something like, I saw Marty. He had a great match with Al Snow. As a matter of fact, that's where they both got a goddamn.
Yeah, he replaced another murderer.
All right, quit now. That was supposed to be Chris Benoit. But that was the thing. Al Snow and Marty Jannetty had like a 30-minute match that night, just tore the house down. Great fucking work. And they both got hired and never had a good match again in the WWF. They got hired off that match and didn't have another good one ever because they weren't given an opportunity. But anyway, a point I was making is Marty was wild and one of the rockers, they were living the rock and roll lifestyle back in the 80s, but I never had an issue with him. I don't know him that well, haven't seen him in ages and ages, but he didn't used to come off to me as a person who was nuts. So I guess I'm assuming that everybody knows what happened. And we should backtrack on this because some people it might not be their week to watch old Marty and see what he's up to.
I wouldn't assume everyone knows what happened because it's still a fluid story. It's still
a fluid story. I think it's more solid than fluid. I think it's number 2 instead of number 1, to be honest with you. Marty Jannetty gets on Facebook and apparently says in the process of having an argument with a lady or woman or whoever that he's seeing or saying something, bad about her, said, well, hey, I remember the first person I made disappear. They didn't look in the Chattahoochee River. They might have found him. And then he goes on in an interview after this creates some consternation, this comment. He goes on in an interview to say that, and he said a few other things too, but basically the story in that first tweet or first post and then said some other things to flesh it out. Basically, the story is he was 13 years old, living in Columbus, Georgia. Everybody knows that's where Marty Jannetty is from. Beautiful Columbus, Georgia, home of Fred Ward and Ralph Freed, old rooster. And he went to buy weed at 13 years of age from a homosexual gentleman, apparently, who he called the F word, who worked at a bowling alley that apparently, did Marty Jannetty also work there? Or did he just hang around to buy weed? He might have worked there also in the story. And in the course of trying to buy the weed from this gentleman, he was probably the homosexual gentleman was probably the guy that sold you the shoes or rented you the shoes. And you wouldn't think a gay guy would want that job because those things are the most unstylish fucking things, but I digress. So instead of selling Marty Jannetty the weed, the bowling alley attendant tries to sexually assault him, grabs him, and drags him to the back alley back behind the alley where he attempts to pull his pants down and apparently anally protrude young 13-year-old Marty Jannetty. And Marty picks up a brick, hits the guy over the head with it, kills him accidentally. But then, of course, what you do every time that you're a 13-year-old prospective weed customer in a back alley behind a bowling alley where you've just killed a gay guy trying to anally protrude you with a brick, you don't call the police. You throw the body in the Chattahoochee River. Have I pretty much relayed to the listeners out there the story that Marty Jannetty is telling out of his lips?
I think so. The only other detail I saw was, I guess he said that he didn't tell his brother because his brother would have gone down there and killed the guy. However,
he was already, that's right. That's the best thing. That's the other thing he said. I didn't tell my brother because I didn't want my brother to go away. He had just come back from Vietnam. Apparently, he would have gone down and killed the dead guy. Does that make any sense? My brother would have gone down there and done some, what would he have done? Dove in a Chattahoochee River, brought the body up and fucking pummeled it about the head and face? So he's already contradicted himself. He didn't tell his brother what happened. He took matters in his own hands and hit the guy with a brick and then disposed of the body, but he didn't tell his brother because his brother would have gone down there. And done what to who? So anyway, apparently not. Since Columbus, Georgia has not been a hotbed for wrestling since the days of promoter Fred Ward, the police department in Columbus doesn't know that there's a high ratio of wrestlers that are full of horse shit. And they have said that they have announced that they're in conducting an investigation into this. Now, it won't be a full-fledged FBI manhunt because they do have some open murder cases pending, but they're going to investigate this. I'm hoping that they just said that to get stupid fucking wrestling website people off their back, calling them to ask them about this. Because
what if he did it? What if they drain that river and they find
if they drain the Chattahoochee River, we've got bigger issues of whether Marty Jannetty committed murder when he was 13 years old. That would be an engineering feat that would fucking blow the Panama Canal out of the fucking water. Or the Panama Sunrise or any of those other moves Adam Cole does. But here's the fucking thing. Besides the fact that it's known that wrestlers are full of shit, and perhaps Marty wanted some attention, or perhaps he was mad at the young lady that he was speaking about, and he wanted to put the fear of the new rockers in her heart. But when you get that specific, I'm not talking about the cops wanting to, I'm talking about he has said this in a wrestling website, at a wrestling-oriented interview or whatever. He fleshed out these details. This shouldn't be hard to fucking check. And when somebody does check, they're either going to find out that, yeah, well, apparently there's something wrong, or he's just full of shit. Because how hard would it be to document in the year 1973 when Marty Jannetty was 13 years old, or let's say he was off a year or two. Let's say anybody from 1971 to 1975, did anyone working at this particular bowling alley suddenly one day disappear and never show up again? Did anybody call and complain about same? Any family members? Hey, have you seen Clem? We haven't seen him in about 6 months or so. We were wondering if he was still at work.
I haven't seen him since he was selling weed to that 13-year-old kid.
Yeah. With the really good super kick. That kid. And so that should not be hard to chase down. And if nobody, there are newspaper files, any missing persons, the cops would know these things. It seems like the cops could just go over to a file cabinet and say, unless this motherfucker was the most friendless, loneliest, no family having fucking unpopular motherfucker in town, and when he disappeared, everybody, including his landlord, who he never paid rent to again, or his fucking house that he never went home to again, and says probably still sitting there.
His employer, who's on shoes?
Yeah,
it was Clem. We don't know where he went.
Clem. Who's on Gorilla? Bill's on Gorilla. I got that one night at Ring of Honor. Who's on Gorilla? Bill. Who the fuck is Bill? They put some guy came to the wrestling school seminar, gave him a headset, and put him on Gorilla because they didn't have anybody else. Anyway, yeah. Did anybody never come home? I bet you his TV is still tuned to the same channel that it was when he left home that day. 45 years ago or whatever. So the point is, what the fuck? I'm so, and this is supposed to be my generation. I'm taking up for these guys not specifically, but in the generation of these guys like Marty as being the fucking people who knew what the fuck was going on in the wrestling business, and then they come out and be completely fucking lunatic in a completely different way.
If they determine, which more than likely they would, that this was a made-up story, that there was no teenage murder mystery with a young Marty Jannetty, should there be charges filed against him? He's wasting police time.
Well, no,
by
he's
concocting this story, and they have to go research it now.
He's not wasting police time. He said something to somebody he's mad at on Facebook. And then the wrestling websites picked it up in the headline, did Marty Jannetty just confess to committing murder? And so then he gets an interview and he goes with it. What the fuck? Anybody wasting the cops' time, it's anybody that fucking believes this and is calling them for comment. And the next wasting of time would be anybody, unfortunately, listening to Marty, unless he's talking about wrestling or telling wrestling stories. Because
how many guys that we know of in wrestling, not guys who, like Benoit, committed a horrible act and that was the end of them, but guys who committed a murder or killed someone and then still had a career? I mean, Scott Hall is obviously one. If Jannetty did this, Billy Jack Haynes claims he was involved in all sorts of shit.
Well, I was about to say, but there was a story about Billy Jack actually spending time in prison early on, even before he got in wrestling, for getting in a fight with a guy and hitting him too hard, which is why I was told he was always, back in those days, very calm and polite and soft-spoken and didn't even squeeze your hand very hard when he shook your hand. But, he was very, laid back. But, I mean, there have been, New Jack said he had a few justifiable homicides. I've never seen documentation of that.
Now he denies it.
Now he denies it now.
Yeah.
Didn't he just say it on Dark Side of the Ring?
I just saw an interview with him on Vlad TV where he said the opposite. That it was the boys who kind of started that rumor and sent it around, and he just...
I'll tell you who started that rumor with me. His fucking lips. His lips started that rumor with me. All right. Anyway... I don't. Bruiser Bedlam's transgressions occurred after he had quit wrestling.
For the record, Bruiser Bedlam tried to blow up a police station. I mean, that's a whole nother league. That's incredible.
Well, but I mean, he was accused of being involved in murder. Also, I still believe he never actually killed anybody. He probably was around at the time things happened, but nevertheless, that's a good trivia question. Who else killed somebody?
Do we want to count Sam Shepard?
Very good. Very good. We don't know whether we can count Dr. Sam or not.
That's a tricky one.
And your boy Lord Blears would probably have, if we can't count war casualties, people in World War II or Korea or whatever, or else that would,
unless it's hand to hand.
Oh, come on.
If it's hand to hand in war, I count that. But if you're sitting in a foxhole with a gun, that's a different story.
Well, but it's not, you're not a murderer if it's hand to hand in war. You're just lucky that you came out on top, and skilled and good and things like that. But we can't count that as having actually, well, I guess then Scott Hall, his was in self-defense. So that would be the same thing.
Hand to hand.
Hand to hand. All right, how did we get on this? Oh, Marty.
Yeah, so Jannetty's crippled one wrestler with their rocker dropper and apparently killed at least one person, because again, that was just the first person he made disappear. Apparently,
that's right. He did say that was the first. Now, the third time I met the Loch Ness Monster, I noticed that dead body floating down the Chattahoochee River was really 8 stories tall and a lizard from the Proterozoic era. Maybe Marty has been making all the wrestling fans disappear. That's where they've gone. He's been making people disappear for the past 25 years until now there's none of them's left. So anyway, we wish, Donald Trump.
I don't wish him well.
No. I was about to say, we wish Marty well. Donald Trump wished the cohort of Epstein, the accused pedophiliac, Well, so we wish Marty well in proving that if his goal in life is to prove absolutely without a doubt that he's telling the truth, that he murdered somebody, then we wish him well in those efforts. If he is indeed telling the truth, we hope that he's able to convince everybody.
Maybe this will become the new thing, the new trend, like wrestlers confessing the crimes.
Well, if they would just make bad wrestling and offenses to the wrestling industry statutory crimes, then every Thursday morning you'd have confession to make the whole Catholic Church jealous. Oh God! All right, yes, Marty, we wish you well in your future murders.
You speak for yourself.